Happy Halloween! As you can see, I am dressed as a white guy this year. You're not watching this during Halloween, are you? Have you ever had that game series you keep coming back to time and time again? Something about it is just comforting and offers escapism from the soul-crushing reality that is life. For me at least, it happens to be Castlevania.
If you're unaware of this franchise's existence, Castlevania is a long-running series about vampire hunters killing what goes bump in the night. These hunters are, most of the time, from the Belmont family, and in each game you're playing as one of their descendants to kill Dracula and his army of ghouls. And this song and dance has been going on for a long time, in-game and in the world we live in. Castlevania dates back to 1986 with Simon Belmont taking center stage, and the games released afterwards have covered centuries and centuries of time. The franchise truly hasn't looked back, ignoring all the bullshit Konami has put it through.
What the fuck?! What the fuck?!
Regardless, something about the legacy of the Belmonts coming back and kicking Dracula's ass fills my head with those stimulating chemicals. It's like crack, but with a coat of Halloween for good measure. Fortunately, I know I'm not alone in this sentiment. Thanks to the Netflix series, a few Konami re-releases, and representation in Smash Bros., Castlevania has seen a resurgence in the gaming zeitgeist. Newcomers and old fans alike are coming back to play those classic games, whether it's the challenging side-scrollers of the old days or the complex Metroidvanias of the modern era. But with a family as large and famous as the Belmonts, some family members tend to fade into obscurity. Whether for good reason or not, we'll see, cause today I wanted to take a look back at 3 of the Belmonts and their games that tend to be overlooked for one reason or another.
I think we should start our journey back in 1989 with the release of Castlevania The Adventure on Game Boy. On paper, this is a pretty cool game to have in the first year of your console's existence. A full-fledged adventure game in the palm of your hands? Any kid would want that. But, as you'll see, this game not only didn't age well, but wasn't even that good at the time. Castlevania The Adventure, like most of its brethren in this era, is a side-scrolling platformer. You play as Christopher Belmont, the second Belmont to be introduced in the series, and an ancestor to Simon from the first and second game on the NES. Just like the first game, the story is very, very simple. You have a whip and now you gotta go beat the fuck out of Dracula. Cool, so what's the issue? Well, to start, this game only has 4 stages, not much of an adventure now is it? I mean, going to Costco is more of an adventure than this. You may be thinking I'm being harsh here since this is an early Game Boy title, but Super Mario Land came out months before and had 12 levels.
In hindsight, I can't even complain about this, cause extending this game past 4 levels is masochism that I'm not even comfortable with. Castlevania is known for its difficulty, but this game just takes it to another degree.
First and foremost, Christopher walks like he has a stick up his ass. He is sluggish and he can't move reliably at all. I know this is a criticism of this era of the series in general, but the hardware limitations amplify this to a noticeable level. It feels like you are constantly walking through honey, which is obviously a bad time. It wouldn't be a problem though if this game was accommodating for this handicap, but it just isn't. Enemies are much faster than you, to the point where certain sections of the game basically require you to take a life to progress. Platforms are spread just far enough that you have to stop and process a jump every single time you want to attempt it. And on top of this, you have no sub-weapons to help even the score with enemies. It is just you and your whip, and not even God can save you. Oh, and you get 3 shots to beat a stage before the game sends you back to the start, which is just super fun. Oh my god, it's just the best. But what really takes this mess and turns it into a genuinely bad game is that it has the audacity to make the player rush. As you've probably noticed with the gameplay, there is a time limit. Nothing wrong with that design choice in other games, but in Castlevania The Adventure, you are playing as the slowest Belmont to ever live. It just puts unneeded stress on the player, and wouldn't you know, that leads to a less fun game, which is such a crazy concept. However, the pit of hell in this game comes at level 3, where the designers knew they were fucking with the player. The gimmick of this stage is that instant death spikes are constantly following you, and you gotta book it. Everything wrong with this game culminates in this level, and if you don't believe me, then I implore you to play it yourself.
So this is where Christopher Belmont's story ends, right? Well, Konami decided to give him a second chance in 1991. A sequel on the same console titled Castlevania II: Belmont's Revenge. Just take everything I said and flip it on its head, cause Castlevania II: Belmont's Revenge is pretty awesome.
We actually have a bit of a story to go over. After Christopher defeated Dracula in the first game, the Vampire Lord used a bit of his magic to hide away. He waited 15 years to get his revenge, and after Christopher passed down his title to his son Soleil, he decided that this was his chance. The vampire stole Soleil away and possessed the boy, while also springing up a bunch of castles around the town. It's now up to Christopher to visit the castles, defeat Dracula once more, and save his son. That's a pretty epic story for a Game Boy title. Well, it gets even better when you actually play the game. Konami took one from the Capcom playbook and decided to make this Mega Man inspired. With 7 levels in total, the player can choose to pick the first 4 levels in any order, visiting the castle they want to. The last 3 are, of course, reserved for the main man himself. Age clearly gave him an upgrade, cause jumps don't feel as tedious and moving around the level and killing enemies actually feels fun. Speaking of killing, sub-weapons are back in the game, albeit 2 options, the axe and the holy water, but still that's better than nothing. You actually feel equipped to deal with the challenges ahead, which in turn makes the difficulty feel fair and earned. When you mess up, it's on you, not some jank that the designers put in to pad out the game. And when you reach the final 2 bosses of Belmont's Revenge, which are legitimately challenging, and see the castle crumble in the morning light, it feels so rewarding.
While I can't recommend the first game in good conscience, I do highly recommend Belmont's Revenge, or the reimagining of the first game if you can find a ROM of it. Sadly, it was only released on WiiWare, but from what I've seen, it looks really fun and adds loads of new content. The reason I'm not going into it for this video is because I haven't played it yet, but I'm sure I'd enjoy it a hell of a lot more than the original game. So let's jump ahead a bit to the early 2000s. Castlevania has already gone through its transformation from side-scrolling platformers to Metroidvanias thanks to 1997's Symphony of the Night on PlayStation. Fantastic game, and with the Game Boy Advance's recent success, Konami wanted to capture some of the magic of the portable darling.
Starting in 2001, they would release 3 Metroidvanias a year apart: 2001's Circle of the Moon, 2002's Harmony of Dissonance, and 2003's Aria of Sorrow. Between the 3, Harmony of Dissonance seems to be left out of most Castlevania conversations, suffering from some sort of middle child syndrome. Circle of the Moon has had countless divisive talks and debates, and Aria of Sorrow is praised by a good chunk of people as one of the best games in the series. So where does that leave Harmony of Dissonance? Well, as a pretty good game. Harmony of Dissonance takes place 50 years after the events of Simon's Quest, where you take control of Simon Belmont's grandson, Just. Just's best friend Maxim returns from training one day to inform them that their childhood best friend Liddy has been kidnapped and taken to a strange castle that popped out of nowhere. To make things even more mysterious, Maxim has amnesia and can't remember any specific details on what went down. So it's up to the 2 of them to explore the castle, rescue Liddy, and figure out what the hell is going on. I like this setup, it gives an air of mystery to the player before the game even starts. Also, it's one of the rare instances where it feels like this journey is a group effort. It feels more realistic than just one man defeating the forces of darkness alone. And when you bump into each other during the story, it just reminds you that a separate story is playing out too, which is pretty cool. As for the gameplay, it's Symphony of the Night with a Belmont overlay, leveling up as you battle enemies, upgrading your armor and weapons, and exploring an ever-expanding map. It's all here. Just is more fragile compared to his warrior family members, and this reflects in his playstyle. A la Alucard, he uses powerful magic and enchantments to fight his battles, which you can find scattered all throughout the castle. This is a really fun aspect of the game. Different spellbooks yield different attack powers when paired with different sub-weapons, so you're constantly mixing and matching to see what you get. But other than that, this game plays eerily similar to Symphony of the Night, which was by design. After all, Koji Igarashi, the game's producer, wanted this game to be as similar as possible to the PlayStation title.
But does this warrant Harmony of Dissonance to be left out and forgotten? I don't think it's bad really when a video game or any piece of media really wants to go down a path that's already been traveled. Especially when that path established a great formula like Symphony of the Night. There's a reason the genre Metroidvania has Vania at the end of it. A new game in a long-running series doesn't have to reinvent the wheel every new entry. Sometimes it's just as valid to do the same with minor improvements. To put it another way, it's nice when your favorite band releases a new album, but sometimes you just want to lay back and listen to some of their greatest hits.
Now, this isn't to say Harmony of Dissonance is one-to-one on the quality of Symphony of the Night. This is a Game Boy Advance title after all. Stuff was definitely cut out or lessened. The castle is less expansive and the weapon and armor customization is more limited. You're forced to use the whip throughout the game, and while I personally like that, I can imagine some people playing this for the first time would get bummed out. But with all of that said, the package presented here is truly remarkable for a portable game from 2002. The castle, while smaller in scope, does provide 2 alternative versions to explore explore. There are plenty of well-crafted bosses scattered throughout, and optional goodies that reward good players from noting details early in the game and backtracking. And I was pleasantly surprised that this game not only rewarded that playstyle and gameplay changes, like enhancements to stats, but could potentially change the ending depending on what you gather and what you do. Harmony of Dissonance has 3 distinct endings, which all depend on how you interact with Maxim and if you gather the different body parts of Dracula. As a side note, this and other details scattered throughout the game will have fans grinning ear to ear. This game is a love letter to Simon's Quest, and diehard nerds like myself just eat that shit up.
Overall, this is a great package for a portable title that aged surprisingly well. It took me about 8 hours to beat, and I don't think it overstayed its welcome in the slightest. More people should check it out, and thanks to the newest season of Castlevania on Netflix, I think they will, given that Juiced is included in the plot. So, he may not stay on the list of overlooked Belmonts for long, and to some, he shouldn't be on this list in the first place. I guess I just wanted to do my due diligence and give this game a boost in eyeballs. But what about a Belmont who has been really forgotten? Like, so forgotten that some fans don't even know they exist. So hidden in the shadows that some may even question if you should have dug them up in the first place. After all, some things are best left in the order of shadows.
In the twilight of the dark age of the Castlevania franchise, way back in the distant year of 2007, Konami decided to release a portable entry in the series, Castlevania Order of Shadows. But this wasn't made for the PSP or DS, no, that would be silly. This game was made for mobile phones that ran on the Java platform Micro Edition, basically flip phones. The iPhone was just announced 2 months earlier when this game dropped, so you can't blame them for not putting it on iOS. Besides, who wouldn't want to play Castlevania on their Nokia flip phone that could survive a nuclear blast? I sure don't after playing this game.
But I'm getting ahead of myself, because I would be doing a disservice to not mention how stupid it is to emulate this game. First, you actually have to find a ROM of the game, which, without jumping into sketchy websites, was actually quite difficult. Luckily, I did some digging, and our good friends at the Internet Archives had a spare, so that was cool. Next, I actually had to find an emulator that could play the thing. There were a few that I found, but none of them on the surface actually looked to make the game playable. Some of them that I found even made you click buttons on a virtual phone, which for a Castlevania game is just not gonna cut it. Fortunately, I found an emulator called J2Me Loader, which fit the bill perfectly. However, I couldn't download it because it was on the Google Play Store, and I didn't have an Android or Google device on me. So I got a virtual machine to download this emulator on the Google Play Store so I could play this ROM. And what did I get for all my troubles? A very bad Castlevania game, that's what.
The story of Order of Shadows is pretty typical for the series. An organization called the Order, led by Rohan Kraus, wants to resurrect Dracula. That obviously can't happen, so the 3 Belmonts decide to roll up and kick ass. You play as Desmond Belmont, who just has the worst design. He looks like a fanfiction character, and that is really saying something when this is a thing.
This is the most obnoxious thing I've ever experienced in my life.
The other 2 Belmonts don't really matter. Their names are Zoe and Dolores. Also, there's something about Rohan potentially killing their parents 20 years ago, but honestly, I don't care. Right off the bat, I gotta talk about the controls. This was a mobile game after all, so I can't go too hard on it. Obviously, when emulating it and playing it on keyboard, there's gonna be some strange inputs. But some of the choices in design were very weird, like how they handle jumps in this game. So when you hit the up key, you jump forward automatically in the direction you're facing. To do a normal jump though, you have to slightly tap the up key. It's little stuff like this that makes the playing experience annoying and tedious. As for Order of Shadows gameplay, it kinda puts its feet on both sides of the fence. The 5 levels you play have non-linear elements to them, however, each path ends up in the same place with the same boss, so it doesn't really feel like there's a point to exploring. Yeah, there are some collectibles and upgrades on different routes, but it doesn't really matter when you don't need any of them because the game is super easy. Most enemies will do no damage to you, there are plenty of health drops, bosses barely want to fight you, and your whip is really all you need to get the job done. In fact, I'd say sub-weapons were actually a detriment, since it took longer to use them, which would leave you vulnerable. Midway through the game, you unlock magic, or alchemy as it's called here, but even that had no purpose. I had a full MP bar from start to finish. The only exception to soloing with the whip is maybe the Minotaurs, but at a certain point you can just double jump right past them.
And yeah, I'd say those Minotaurs are the hardest part of the actual game, even surpassing Dracula himself. He's a gigantic pussy in this game. He was clearly woken up too soon, cause he is so easy. Just keep whipping him and heal with all the items you saved up and watch the credits roll. Okay, well, I kind of feel bad for shitting on this game, but I kind of don't as well.
Order of Shadows is a mess best left forgotten. Desmond doesn't hold a candle to anyone in the Belmont lineage, and it shows in this 30-minute adventure. I mean, I spent more time trying to download and get this game working on my PC than actually playing the game itself. Unless you are a die-hard Castlevania fan or really curious to see what's going on with this game, I would stay away. I would even play Castlevania The Adventure over this, cause at least that game is conveniently available.
3 Belmonts forever etched into this YouTube channel. As a fan of the series, I hope that this talk has motivated you to pick up some Castlevania games and give them a try. The collections available on modern platforms are a good place to start, and show to Konami that people still care about this franchise. Maybe if we're lucky in the future, we could get the Metal Gear treatment and get a modern remake. I don't know which game they would pick, but it would be awesome to see love of any kind. But that's just a pipe dream at this point, so I guess I'll just continue to look back.